Okay, so the first question is always the worst one for any fan of any artist to answer. If hand up your back, you have to choose which is your favorite Tom Petty album.
Yeah, man, this is a terrible question.
They get worse.
I know. Uh, so the first thing I want to say is that an album I've listened to more than any other, except for the one that I wrote about, is Long After Dark, and I think it's an unfairly dismissed record. I think that it's a little stiff, and a lot of it sounds alike, but in many ways, that's what I like about it. Like it's a running record. You put it on, it's great. I think the songs are good. I
Yeah.
think it sounds okay, and there's a uniformity to it that I like, that I think a lot of people don't like it for. But I think that's the album I've listened to the most, probably,
Right.
just because I put it on and thoughtlessly run like a goofball. When I'm thinking of my favorite albums, one that I want to put for, like, the live anthology is great, but I know that doesn't count because there's some performances on there that I think are superior to the studio versions.
Yeah.
But if I really had to pick, it would be between Torpedoes and Wildflowers. And I think I'm going to come down on Wildflowers, but that
Okay.
hurts me because it depends on my mood,
Yeah, of course.
you know. But I think, but here's the thing: like, if I was going to put one on Voyager and send it into space,
Yeah.
to interstellar space, to see another civilization, I think it would have to be Damn the Torpedoes.
Just because of the impact of that record, right? And it changed so many things in rock and roll production as
Yeah.
part of anything else. Everyone started, well, how do you make drums sound like that? How do you get this balance? But I always think of those three. I think of that as the Iovine trilogy. And I don't think of Southern Accents as an Iovine album because it really isn't. And he was
No.
only there for part of it. But those three records, Damn the Torpedoes, he takes this set of kids who were really still figuring out studio craft and learning how to record an album. And Denny Cordell was so hands off on the second album. So he comes in, now they've got this taskmaster who's really going to make them work.
Mhm.
So you get this brilliant, fantastic collection of songs that comes out of that.
Mhm.
Then they take that into Hard Promises. Okay, well, now we know what's expected. Now we can sort of write a little bit more with that in mind. And so that's where I think we get Long After Dark is now the culmination of that process
Uh-huh.
of learning how to do this. And then it's like that epitome of some of it, I think maybe does sound a little bit samey because they're so good at writing songs and recording them
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah, man, to think of that as a trilogy is a way I hadn't actually thought about it. And that makes perfect sense. I think that's right. That feels right to
Yeah.
me. Yeah. What's your favorite?
I tend to go to Wildflowers mostly because that's the
Yeah.
one that was when Tom Petty became the genius. Because I
Yeah.
went back and I
Yeah.
sort of, because I knew him peripherally, and I actually got into him mainly through the Wilburys, really, because my dad's a huge Beatles fan, and so was
Okay.
I. And so that association, well, who's this Tom Petty guy who's hanging out with Jeff Lynne, Roy Orbison, Dylan, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
who's this guy? So I got into him and sort of listened to it. But then I went back I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago, and thought, well, I'll do a deep dive. I'll start with the first album and I'll just work my way forward. Of course, get to Damn the Torpedoes. Wow, Hard Promises, I love it. When I got to Wildflowers, that was like okay, so this guy's not just a rock and roller. He's not
Uh-huh.
just writing disposable pop songs, or he's not any one thing. He's got this huge array of things that he can talk about and ways to talk about them. So that's the one I usually go to. Plus, it's a
Yeah.
double album, so you get two for the price of one. So
Yeah. Twice as much.
yeah. Okay, question two: Mudcrutch or the Traveling Wilburys?
No, Wilburys.
Wilburys.
Yeah. Easy one for me. Um, there's something that I just don't find myself attracted to about a lot of the Mudcrutch stuff.
Okay.
I can't really name it because I've never spent a lot of time trying to think about it.
Okay.
But I think that the Wilburys was just such a fun little flair of brilliance.
Yeah.
And I think there are things that are very similar to Mudcrutch. And I think there's very few things that are similar to Wilburys.
Yeah.
And so always, always Wilburys, but when it comes between those two for me.
Yeah, that's true. And I do. I always love the stories about they're sitting around the kitchen table, and Roy Orbison goes to make a cup of tea, and there's just
Mhm.
five guys who have no ego. They're all musicians. They're all phenomenally successful. And everyone forgets
Yeah.
about Jeff Lynne too. How good Jeff Lynne is
Oh
as a
God.
as a as a
Yeah.
songwriter, as a musician, as a producer, at everything. He's just brilliant at everything he does.
It's like 70% of the time something comes on some like rock radio station. I'm like, what is that? And it's ELO. It's like,
Yeah,
oh well, God, why have I been sleeping on this?
yeah, that guy could have had a riff.
Yeah.
Okay, so as you are a guitarist, if you could join the Heartbreakers on stage for one song, what would it be? And would you just play guitar, or would you play guitar and sing?
Is it fair if I give you two, one for each?
Sure,
All right.
absolutely.
Because if I was going to sing one, I would get on the stage and sing The Waiting. Oh, which, God, how good would that feel?
Yeah,
You know? So much fun. Such a perfect song.
It's
If
such a
I was
hook.
gonna,
It's such a hook, right? Like it's just
such a hook,
yeah.
but also just like the verses would be so much fun to sing.
Hmm.
Um, God, that'd be great. Like that'd be narcotic in its effect. Um, if I was going to play a song, I would want to do something they don't normally do. It would be Straight Into Darkness. But not that they don't do it, but something about Straight Into Darkness that they don't do. Like on the
Yeah.
live anthology, in the breakdown between the second and third verse after the chorus, after the bridge, there's a moment where they're just kind of vibing, and then Tom himself plays a few little notes.
Yeah.
Not really a solo, but what I would like to do is during that sort of vibing breakdown, just like trade solos with Mike. That would be
Yeah.
so fun. Just not like, not a battle, but just sort of like, to play with, to play. It's called
Yeah.
playing, right? And just play with him over that track, which they
Well,
don't usually do. Like they don't. I don't remember. I've never heard him like sort of like let Mike Campbell go. He's tasteful, so he never goes crazy, really.
yeah.
But to like just let him off the leash there and like be off the leash with him during
Yeah.
that part of that song, which I think is an incredible song, would be a lot of fun.
And around that chord progression would be great. Yeah, because it's again another one of those underrated gems that if you're not a Tom Petty fan, you probably don't know that song. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh man, it's one of the ones I'd give. It's on a playlist I'm going to give to someone who doesn't listen to Tom Petty and say,
Yeah.
listen to this. It's on all of those. So it's such a brilliant song. Anyways, yeah.
If you're gonna do drums, would you be Stan or Steve? Which song would you pick?
Well, it depends how I have to play like him because I can't play traditional grip, so I can't play like Stan. So a lot of
Okay.
those fills become different because
Right,
when
'cause
you
the-
fill,
the-
Buddy Rich talked about this for years. The guys who match grip, you don't fill the same as someone who's traditional grip. So I'd probably go with, honestly, if I could play it, and I still haven't got it down pat, but Fault Lines. That
Okay.
Steve's drum line on Fault Lines is just off the chart, brilliant.
Uh-huh.
That little bossa nova thing he has on the ride bell, it's just give me a break. Come on.
All right. I never thought about the grip having it's like a mechanical difference on the way you could play. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
But that's really fascinating.
It's the same with Ringo's stuff, right? Because Ringo's a lefty, he doesn't lead with the
Yeah.
right hand. So
Yeah.
you have to adjust all those little fills. They're awkward. They're just awkward, So
that's really interesting.
yeah, why did no one ever tell Ringo you can play left-handed? Just put the snare over there and the hat there, and then just play this way, you idiot! Like,
You should send him a letter. He's still got a little bit of career left.
yeah. I'm sure he'd love that, wouldn't he? Yeah. So who would be your dream opening act at a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers concert?
Oh, the band.
Okay.
When they were all alive.
Yeah,
and then Dylan would come out in the middle, and then it'd become a Heartbreakers concert.
Then you could have all those crossovers, right?
Yeah. It'd be like an undulating show. I think that'd be great. It's easy just to pick any band and say I would love to see any band with the Heartbreakers, right? Because I feel like that there's very few. I mean, there's some it wouldn't make sense to put some like Phil Oakes up there. That'd be kind of jarring. But as far as a rock band goes, I feel like anyone could pull it off. But I really think it'd be great to see the band and the Heartbreakers kind of like sharing the stage in some sort of Rolling Thunder review sort of thing.
Yeah, I love those concepts. I think someone had said Fleetwood Mac because then you could get Stevie out and you could have
that's a great
idea play something
too.
with Fleetwood. You know what I mean? Like you could have all those little crossover things.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Yeah. Or Johnny Cash, get Johnny Cash in. I do. So, do you have a favorite band member other than Tom?
Yeah, Benmont.
Yeah,
just lovely guy. And even before, like I met him, and like we're not friends. Like we met for talking about the book, and we had a few Twitter messages afterwards after he told me he read it. But I just think that it's hard to decide impact between Mike and Benmont on the evolution of the band. But I just have always had a soft spot for Benmont's playing. And then once you meet him, he's just a lovely guy. So I think he's probably my favorite non-Tom Heartbreaker.
It's funny because they really are both musicians.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're a keyboard player, you understand how good Benmont Tench is.
Yeah.
And when you hear him, like, because you think, oh, he's just a rock organ. But man, when you hear him rip out that boogie woogie stuff,
I know
the stride piano that he can play, it's like, the hell did that come from?
And then like he can turn into Nicky Hopkins. I mean, it's just he's so dynamic. It's incredible. Yeah.
Well, and a student of the craft too. Like there's that sense of, I think, again, I was talking to Jeff. He says he's still, the guy's in his 70s. He's had the career now. He still practices. Every day. You know what I mean? So there's that dedication to just keeping getting better and better and better. So yeah, always appreciate that too.
Yeah.
So if there's a Tom Petty concert from history that you weren't at that you could go to, if you had a time machine, which one did you go back and watch?
It's hard. Like I don't feel like I know a lot of historical Petty concerts, but there's
Okay.
one I watch on YouTube a lot, which is that Winterland 78 show where he gets pulled into the stage.
Yeah.
Like they are 78. I mean, top form, world-class rock and roll band. The
Yeah.
set's pretty good. There's energy. So I would like to be there. But also, I would be interested just for personal reasons because I've thought about it a lot. It being at some of those LA shows at the Wiltern that were recorded for Back at the Plantation. Now, there's tracks on that album that weren't recorded there, but the bulk of it is from those shows.
Yeah.
And I've thought about those shows a lot, and it would be very interesting to see the vibe of those shows.
Yeah.
And then there's also the show that I think was in North Carolina where he finally said, we don't do this, where he kind of put his foot down about people bringing the battle flag to the show. And it would be really interesting to be in the room to see how that felt.
Just to get the mood of the crowd and see what the sense of the tenor of the sort of, that would be really interesting to see that for sure.
Like all the actual shows I saw were late career, right? Probably not before 2010. So I would love to see one of those high 70s shows would be really incredible. And the one that I watched the most on YouTube is the Winterland show.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Walls Circus or Walls number 3? And I
thought this was going to be easy.
Okay. Great.
I thought it was going to be easy. I was listening to him a lot today. I'm surprised at this. I'm going to say Circus. I thought I was going to say 3. And I still prefer the vocal performance on 3, which is much more laid back, much softer. And I used to think I liked the Jingle Jangle Birds vibes from 3.
Yeah.
But today it was Circus. I prefer the vocal performance and the vocal layering, the backing vocal that's along with them in the chorus.
Yep.
On 3, but I think that Circus is the one that I prefer right now. What do you think? Like, this is your Rorschach test. So what does it mean about someone when they answer one way or the other about this?
I think what I've learned is it means that I'm wrong. Because when I wrote this question, I assumed everyone would say 3 because to me, well, just because I think that's the bones of the song. It's like you said, right?
Yeah, it is.
That's the way Tom wrote it on an acoustic guitar. Yeah. That's what he would have brought into the studio to work up for sure, right? Yeah. So that's when I like those performances. And my favorite performance of it is the PBS special where he's got the black pole neck on, and he comes out and says, "Everywhere I look is me." You know, he does that thing, and you've got Scott Thurston's the harmonies, these things on that version are just absolutely beautiful. But going back and listening to Circus again, I didn't really listen to Circus much. I thought, well, 3 is superior. Why would I listen to both versions? You go back to listen to Circus, and it's just got so much energy and charisma. There's so much character to that version of it.
It's punchy.
Yeah. And it's got Lindsey Buckingham, who can sing a little bit, you know. So.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, I thought it was going to be, hands down, it was going to be 3.
Yeah.
Like when I saw that you were going to probably ask me about that, I was like, oh, come on. That'll take 7 seconds. And then I started to listen to them. But then I had them open on, like, I had one open on YouTube, one open on like my music app, and just listening to song by verse by verse, second by second. Yep. And when it comes down to it, I think that Circus is the one that right now that I like more. But again, the vocal performance on 3 is, I like the mellowness of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what song, if you have one song, what song do you most frequently recommend to people who don't know Tom's music? And I'll couch this a little bit by saying that I think you would struggle to find anyone who doesn't know any Tom Petty music. But if you've got someone who's somewhat indifferent, what deep cut would you give them? Maybe. I'm going to change the question.
Deep cut. Okay, so I'm going to push back against the construction of the question.
Okay,
you've already addressed part of it, which is how are you going to find someone who doesn't know Tom Petty that you want to be friends with, that you even care about exploring? The second thing is, I feel like you got to know what kind of person you're dealing with.
There we go.
Right. So there's some folks who don't really care about rock and roll that you might want to still have in your life. And there's some folks who don't really care about acoustic guitars that you still might want to have in your life. Right. So I think that the deep cut changes it a little bit. My initial response would have been, for folks who are rock and roll people who like electric guitars, would be American Girl.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, it would be Free Fallin'. Because although I don't love that song a whole lot, it's got the anthemic stuff that I feel is essential to the best Petty.
Yep.
Whereas like I would want to say Wildflowers, but it doesn't quite have the anthemic-y roll down the window and scream at passersby moment or sing at passersby moment. Deep cuts. One would be Straight Into Darkness. I think the Night Watchman's really cool.
Love that song.
Yeah.
Love that song. A great story behind that one too. You know, that's another one that's got a really good story, an origin story. Also. Well, so Tom was, it was at the point where he got big enough where he realized he actually needed security at home. So he had a security guard outside his house. And so he'd go out at 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and just kind of chat to this guy. And so it came to this thing like,
Oh, I do know the story.
yeah, so
Yeah,
it's that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
idea
yeah,
that,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
which is super cool, right? And then you get this little, again, this sketch, this little vignette of this person who's got this job, and you know, I don't know, it's super cool.
I'm trying to figure out. God. So like I published that book 4 years ago at this point, and then
Yeah.
there was a period of not listening to Petty, and so some of my memory has atrophied a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
But there's a live performance of on the anthology, the first live anthology.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah, man. The live performance of The Wild One Forever.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah, 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 yeah.
I actually talked to Ben Mon about that song, and he said it's not a song they performed a lot because it was hard for him to hit the note a lot.
Yep.
But on that sort of original live anthology thing, the performance is incredible. And I would defy anyone who has any substance to listen to that song and not be affected by it and not become a fan. So
Yeah.
that might actually be the sort of full acid test for if this is someone who's going to be a Petty fan, because it's such a beautiful performance
Yeah.
of an incredible song.
Great. And off the first album, like, you think
Yeah.
about that, just some of those songs on that first album. And I go back to this sometimes with, you know, fans tend not to be, I don't listen to American Girl a ton
Mhm.
because I've heard it so many times, it's just
Yeah.
there, right? And it's the same. I don't listen to Bohemian Rhapsody very much. I don't listen to
Mhm.
Stay Away very much.
Yeah.
You tend to drift into the deep cuts. But when you do go back and listen to American Girl or Breakdown or The Waiting or Refugee, it's like, that's just a really, really well-written song.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Well
it's
written,
stuff
well
like American
performed.
Girl. It's lean. There's
Yeah.
no fat on those bones. Every part, you know, it's interesting because the drums were mic'd with one overhead. Like, you know,
Mhm.
that's just a weird way to record drums. So there's all those elements to it that are just very, very clever and very, very cool. And they're easily dismissed just because, well, it's just simple. It's hard to write simple sometimes, you know, like it's
Totally
making it
hard to write
impactful.
simple. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'll say is like I don't really put those songs on anymore. I never intentionally play those songs at this
Yeah,
point. But I never, if I'm flipping through the radio and they come on, I never flip past them.
absolutely. Okay, your last question in this set is describe Tom Petty in 3 words. And being a writer, this should be easy, right?
Essential American musician.
Beautiful, beautiful. We've got 2 adjectives. 1 noun, perfect. It's funny too because I get some people answer that with like a phrase or, you know, 3 words that actually fit together. Then some people just sort of will itemize quality. So I do find that one interesting to see how people's brains work sometimes.
What
You
are
know, and
some
I
of the
think,
things to say?
well, like
What
something
do
would be
you
like
think of? Sorry, go on.
passionate, creative, authentic. You know,
So I knew you were going to say authentic. And so
right.
here's
Some of
my
those are the,
question, right?
okay, go ahead.
So how does authenticity read for a guy that entirely reinvented himself, right? Who goes from being, uh, who put himself forward once he got out to LA as a Southern Californian, and then like donned the garb of the Southerner, and
Yeah,
then in reaction to that went back to being the Southern Californian, right? Which the allegiance to regionalism is interesting,
yeah,
right? Because Southern California is also a very distinct region, and he became a Southern California guy, right?
yeah.
I feel like, to rip off a phrase like the title of a book by Lionel Trilling, there's a difference between authenticity and sincerity. And I would find him
Yeah.
more sincere than authentic, because I think a lot of the stuff that people think are authentic about him is kind of performative.
Okay.
I think the identity stuff is they not the identity within the expression of the music, but the public
Yeah. The
character,
persona.
the persona. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you. I feel like the persona is pretty much just all performative, right? So it's funny that people are always like, he's so authentic.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting way of thinking about it too, because I think there's, you know, there's it's sincerity in a way, sort of authenticity of intent. If that makes any
Oh,
sense, but
wow. Sincerity is authenticity of intent. That's incredible.
something along those lines. But because I always get a bit frustrated because I know people. I'm a big Foo Fighters fan, and I really like
Huh?
Dave Grohl because he's got that same kind of quality where
Huh?
you kind of believe him, right?
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh yeah, but that's just it's a front he's putting on." It's like, okay, but if it is, at least it's a nice one. At least it's
Yeah.
an empathetic one. At least it's a,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's at least a
Yeah.
humble one. I'd rather that than the David Lee Roth kind of approach
Right.
to authenticity, right? So yeah, you're
Interesting. That's a
authentic, but
very
you're
good point.
authentically a jackass. So I'm gonna be careful what I say. I've got very good friends who do a Van Halen podcast, and we have the Hagar versus Roth, and we kind of make apologies for Gary, but the Hagar versus Roth thing is a, you know, a good argument to have. That
Make apologies for Gary. Sharon?
yeah, poor guy.
I mean, look, where's he going to go from Nuno Betancourt? Right, he had to go to Eddie Van Halen. That's really the only way up.
Yeah.
I I feel like the debate, the Van Halen debate, is going to be never ending.
Of
And
course. Yeah.
honestly, I don't feel like I have to pick. I think that they're both super fun.